Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Scrutiny meeting, March meeting of Norwich City Council's Scrutiny Committee. So we'll kick off item 1, apologies. I've had apologies from Councillor Young, and Councillor Champion will be here for her, and also apologies from Councillor Brochette Colton. I think everyone else is here, so good afternoon. Any declarations of interest for any items that have been discussed today? No, thank you. People are happy that I sign as being an accurate record the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of January, which is the informal meeting held online, and the ordinary meeting of the 2nd of February. Yeah. Agreed? Yeah, thank you. So item 4 is our work programme, and on page 45 of your pack, we've got 2 recommendations. One is to consider whether we add the item of the purpose and efficacy of council consultations as attached to Appendix B to the 23-24 Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. And I think the view would be that would be looked at the first meeting back in the new civic year. Thank you. And if the format of an informal workshop to discuss work programming should be replicated on the 25th of May 2023. And there's a second recommendation, which is to note the deadline for submission of topic forms for the upcoming civic year, which is Friday the 28th of April 2023. Does anyone have any things they wish to say on that? Councillor Galvin.
Thank you very much. Yes, the 28th of April will be topic forms for the whole civic year ahead.
With a view that they would then be discussed by new members of the committee on the 25th of May.
Okay, thank you. Would it be possible to have that committee, I think there are plans to do this anyway, but just to check, a tracker of all the recommendations that Scrutiny has made this year and actions that have been completed on them, so that we can look at next year's work with the benefit of that. Thank you.
That should be absolutely fine. In part, we did bring a tracker to the last meeting. There were specific reasons why we weren't able to update it for this reason, for this meeting. But so it's absolutely fine because it's sort of sitting there in the background already.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Councillor Carlo.
Yeah. I'd just like to ask how the Scrutiny is going to take forward matters highlighting the recent peer review. Because we in particular mentioned that the importance of focusing on the council's own operations in terms of setting an agenda, as opposed to get agendas of external matters to the council.
Yeah, thank you for that. So the recommendations from the peer review, many will be rolled into the new corporate plan. Leah, I wonder if you've got a sort of perhaps a view on how that might work best if it comes to scrutiny in the future.
Yeah, as you just mentioned, I think the intention, and apologies, we've got a few noisy motorbikes outside, so if I pull the microphone a bit closer.
We opened the windows because it was a bit hot in here. So.
Yeah, it's been too cold for a while, now it's too hot. Yeah. The intention is to roll actions from the peer review into the corporate plan refresh. Now, I understand the corporate plan refresh will be coming to Cabinet early in the civic year. I'm not quite sure whether that will be their meeting in June or July. It might be something the Scrutiny Committee go, okay, we'd like to look at that document before it goes to Cabinet, because you would normally look at the corporate plan. Now, I think because the timing's a little bit uncertain, I think we might have to be a little bit, I don't want to use the word flexible, we might have to think about the timing of that to Scrutiny, purely because does it fit to when your meetings are? If not, we might need to look at a special meeting if that's something the Scrutiny Committee particularly want to do. We'll then have the corporate plan refresh should start to go under its more normal cycle again. So potentially about December, January time, you'd be looking at the next iteration for 24-25 to come through. So if you are seeing what you'd expect in terms of the peer review actions in the corporate plan refresh, when you look at it in June or July, then you might be thinking, okay, do we want to pick that up when we look at the corporate plan in January, or do we want to pick it up separately or before that, around that? So you get the chance at the corporate plan refresh to then go, okay, is that reflective? Or is the peer review reflected in the corporate plan refresh, yes or no? If no, you want to think about what to do with it. if yes, then you want to think about what to do with it too. So I apologise if that's a little bit of a woolly answer, but there's various factors dependent, and of course we are starting work on that at the moment, and that's part of the reason, because I've not got something before me. I can go, oh, clearly it's just there, and we'll be able to show you at that point. We're just not quite there.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you for that. I can see the difficulties in timings, but there was quite a lot in the peer review, and it's something that Scrutiny can pick up straight away, and it's very germane to Scrutiny. Because so I wondered if we on Scrutiny at one of our first meetings could just have an item looking at the peer review. We could either look at it particularly around Scrutiny. I don't really want to put in a topic form about Scrutiny and the peer review. It seems a bit circular, but I wonder, what do you think, Chair, about making sure that Scrutiny focuses on what is said about Scrutiny? And there's an argument that we should focus on not peer review, but
yeah, I mean, obviously Scrutiny is mentioned in the peer review, and I think it does actually make sense for the Scrutiny Committee to have a sort of almost a deep dive into the bit that relates to scrutiny, and that isn't saying that I think the Scrutiny Committee should look in detail and absolutely all of the peer reviews. I think we'd be here for forever and a day, because it's a very comprehensive document. But I think it's, you know, looking at what it specifically says about scrutiny, I think would be a good thing. But I think presumably that would be decided at the 25th of... Do we need a topic form for that? Or
yeah.
I think it's always useful to have topic forms because they help articulate what you're seeking, albeit when it comes to the corporate plan, it is expected in the Constitution the Scrutiny Committee does pre-scrutinise that, so it's almost a set position. You'd be looking at that document, it's just making sure we've got the peer review captured as part of that.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on the work programme? Councillor Driver.
Yeah, just on that peer review, if we're going to look into this, wouldn't it be wise to meet in all early on the 25th and go through that before we work out what our work plan is going to be for the rest of the year?
It's up to you as a committee to always determine what you want to do and what you want to look at. I think when we've got the corporate, it was confirmed at Cabinet last week that the action planning for the corporate plan refresh should be captured. The action planning for the peer review will be captured in the corporate plan refresh, and there's an expectation you'd look at the corporate plan. So it's one of those funny meandering topics that we need to factor in.
Well, I think there's things in there about scrutiny. Surely we should be looking at them before we actually
there's a good logic there, actually. It says if you're looking at the comments on the Scrutiny Committee before you actually decide what you're going to do. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would support that.
Make all these decisions on the 25th, but then on the
If
27th.
we can make that work from a meeting scheduling point of view, I think
We'll try.
yeah. It's a couple of days after the AGM, and but no, I think in terms of, I don't know if anyone else has got a view on that, but I think Councillor Driver makes a very valid point there about looking at what the peer review is saying about scrutiny before then deciding what the Scrutiny Committee does for the next year, as a very helpful document to help guide the committee. But any other comments on the work programme, or shall I move on to the next item? No, I think that's fine. People are happy to accept those recommendations? Yeah, lots of yeses, thank you. So next item is item 5. We would normally have taken an update from our NHOSC rep, but unfortunately they're not available. But I know a couple of members have got some comments they want to make for taking away, I think. So anyone to indicate, please? Councillor Osborne.
I guess I'm addressing this to Councillor Julie, Julie, normally NHOSC. The NHOSC will be considering the walking centre closure at the June meeting, I think. Councillor Bogerland specifically has asked if the reps for City Council would speak to her about the design of the consultation, because consultation is pretty short, lots of leading questions in it. It's really quite a biased consultation. So Councillor Bogerland has written to NHOSC about it, which is specifically asking if reps from here to talk to her about it.
So when did you say it was coming to NHOSC?
June, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Councillor Stutley?
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for the question. Yes, if I'm down to attend, then I would gladly meet with Councillor Bowline, and I'll pass on that message to Councillor Roger Colton with a view to meeting. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't at least have a conversation about how you would like Norwich City Council to be represented there, and go from there.
And so just plug the petition also for anyone who's not signed it. There's a petition, original community-led petition, that's about 7,000 signatures, still open, so please sign that, everyone.
That's what you need to do.
Yeah, well, there's a community-led one that's still open.
And the consultation is still running, so
Yeah.
opportunities for everyone to have their say on that.
It's just as we're discussing this, I wonder if someone can confirm the date for the end of the consultation, so that people can get in time, please.
Yeah, I'll take Councillor Thomas's point, and I'll look up the date at the same time. So, Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, just a point, really. I did actually go to the walking centre, first reading, so I was there for a couple of hours. So obviously I think it was a filled-in consultation document, 20 pages, only in English, and obviously a lot of people are just swinging massive people, lots of them, claiming English wasn't their first language, and it seemed to be somewhat flawed.
Yeah, it's just to be on the same design.
Thank you. Sorry, I've not actually been able to find that yet. So.
I'm just looking at it, just looking.
I think it's 26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, 6th of March. Thank you. So, any other comments on NHOSC? No? Great, thanks very much for that. So we now move on to item 6, page 55, which is the scrutiny review of welcoming refugees and asylum seekers to Norwich and overcoming obstacles to their smooth integration. We've got potential for recommendations today, so to determine whether there are any recommendations that we wish to raise at this point, and whether the committee wishes to commission any further work to be undertaken to discuss the initial findings. And Leah, if I could ask you just to sort of outline the report, and then we'll go to members' questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Albeit the recommendations probably summarise a little bit of where we are in it very neatly. At your January meeting, you agreed some terms of reference for undertaking the review, and although we had suggested a survey of organisations and engagement with refugees and asylum seekers directly, I think it specifically requested a couple of other things be done, and particularly whether to survey refugees and asylum seekers directly in consultation with the City of Sanctuary. We did look at taking that forward in consultation with the City of Sanctuary, who was somewhat uncomfortable with taking that approach. And we also approached a couple of organisations about hosting an event for refugees and asylum seekers who were somewhat reluctant, but we were really pleased that Zainab Cafe did then step in and were keen to have an event, which I think those of us that attended that event was incredibly worthwhile, and I found it personally a really moving event to hear from people about their experiences. So we've undertaken that event, and the notes that the Democratic Services team had captured from that are included in your report today. I think Councillor Galvin's also captured some notes as well, which he separately circulated to members of the committee, so you should have those. We have done a survey of organisations. Unfortunately, as you see in the report, we received a very limited response, which it was a little bit disappointing, albeit it has set out a couple of organisations came back to us in different ways. So the question that I essentially had when looking at this, and I'm sure is in your minds, is where do we go with this work? There is a point to which we could make some initial recommendations, if you feel inclined to do so today, and then I'd then say, perhaps we don't take it forward at this stage, or there might be areas that you think are worth exploring, which we could take forward perhaps during the pre-election period and a little bit afterwards, and factor into your work programme for next year, if you wish to do so. Albeit, I think from learning more myself and from the experience of talking to others, it showed the breadth of the topic that's before us, and that actually if we do take things forward, I think I'd be suggesting it might be helpful to try and narrow down some of that thinking and look at particular topics and learning from that insight that we've gained so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Galvin, please.
Thank you very much, Leah, and thank you for organising the work. And huge thanks to Zainab and Rich and Plus and everyone that helped councillors make links. I think it really is going the extra mile to talk to people and meet them where they are. And as you said, it provides a really valuable insight into lives where really people don't have a voice, and what's important is to seek out people where they are and talk to them, and you really prepared that well, so thank you to the FAMA project as well. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure we record that, and I hope it's the beginning of talking like that. And so I kind of say that from that meeting, people gave us that information, and not everyone could attend, not all councillors could attend. So we have got a set of councillors that would like to follow up and attend things, so that would be good. So that's one open loop that we need to carry on with. And in terms of the consultation, as we saw, there wasn't a very high response from organisations, and we weren't able to do consultation with service users. And I think it's really important to get a better understanding of the barriers people face, etc. We need to do work with consultation, and I wonder if we could, so I'm working up to sort of suggesting that we use some of the work we've done so far to scope a consultation and to work with the organisations to make sure the consultation is the right kind of consultation, so that we get a closer consultation, and that is part of our work going forward. I take your point that it has to be the right kind of consulting, and we need to work with the organisations that are very close to the service users. But I think it is possible and would be valuable to take this as the beginning of listening. So if I put that forward as a recommendation that we carry on the work and do a consultation with service users and clearly, carefully define it. Perhaps, I think Denise had a point about the community connectors being involved in some way, and Max could perhaps be involved as well. But there are lots of options there, and we do need to get them forward. And I don't want to have all that, sorry, I'm speaking for a long time, but I think it's really important to get the point that those people gave us a lot of their time. They really told us a lot of information, and I want to make sure that we act on it.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I don't know if you want to come back, or whether Councillor Huntley wishes to come in at this stage. So we'll take some more member discussion, and then we'll.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I could certainly encourage any more engagement with service users if we've got opportunities to do that. If City of Sanctuary were uncomfortable with the idea of a survey being conducted, what were their concerns, please?
Apologies, Councillor Huntley. I'm just looking back at the correspondence in relation to this. I mean, there's some further information I know of in regard to a specific group of users that unfortunately relates to a Home Office policy, and therefore I can't discuss in a public forum. But that is a specific group. I think some of the main concerns revolve around for people that have been refugees and asylum seekers. Sometimes their engagement, particularly with official organisations, is sometimes not the most positive, and I do appreciate the argument to that. Could be a survey that results in outcomes could change that perception, but it's a survey from the council might firstly be something they avoid because they are concerned about what would that mean if they fill it in because of past experience. But I think it's actually would it be some form of deterrent? Would it make people nervous to see a letter or an email from the council? I'd give a specific example, but I'm just not able to do so in a public session.
Can I bring Councillor Halley back, and then I'm going to bring Councillor Carlo in just to talk about the community connectors a little bit more, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. If a letter or an email from the council might be a cause of concern, might the solution be similar to what happened in the Zona Cafe, where it's a face-to-face meeting? Perhaps we need to think not just of a survey being a form that is sent through the post to people.
Councillor Carlo, if I bring you in about, I think the community connectors thing probably links in quite neatly at this point.
Well, it's just a suggestion that resources are used from community connectors to conduct face-to-face survey interviews with different communities. Community connectors are obviously trained in questioning and engaging with people, so they seem an important resource to use. I understand there's 2 years left in the project, funding project. I think in terms of conducting any further surveys, I feel it would be helpful to be clear about what we want to achieve. And in a sense, I think people who we're engaging may feel that is going to lead to a better outcome for them directly, and it may not do so immediately. So I don't know if that would be problematic in terms of groups engaging.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring in Councillor Giles, who'd indicated, and then Councillor Galvin and Councillor Thomas.
Thanks. So I was just going to make a practical point that obviously, not being Home Office, we don't have records of everyone's immigration status in the city. So it's not like we have a database of who are refugees in Norwich, who are asylum seekers in Norwich to utilise to send out to that specific pool of people in a practical sense. It may well be that rather than, sort of for you to decide that rather than having a formal event, maybe getting in touch individually as councillors with these organisations, as many of us have done in the past, and asking about dropping in at one of the many sessions they have going on, and then having those informal conversations while you're there, rather than making a formal event. It might be intimidating to people that already have a significant fear of authority because of the threatening letters they're getting from the Home Office about Rwanda and what have you. That's my point.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've got Councillor Galvin, Councillor Thomas, and then Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've kind of done that already, and I'm looking to move forward a bit. I think we can have any survey would have a section where there is an ethical basis for the research, and any decent survey, which I think this would be, would have that ethical basis at the beginning, which would allow participants to know that this isn't going to necessarily affect their personal circumstances, etc. And it would have to be carefully designed and a professional survey. And I think from the point of view of doing justice to this topic, I think we do need to move on from individual councillors going to talk to refugees, although I think that's entirely valid and a very good way forward in one level. I think as a council to get really good data, really good information, what we need to do now is to move forward and have a proper survey where we talk to users, and we can use these organisations. I accept we're not the Home Office, but we can actually work with our partners to design something that everyone feels is acceptable to them and gives us some really robust data. Because without robust data, we can't make good policies or change the way we do things.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would defer to the idea of not having a survey, and that goes against the grain because that's what we normally do. And we take that for granted, that's how you start getting the data, and you finding out and getting that feedback. The people I've represented over the years, former asylum seekers and refugees, they're not just one group. It's very disparate, quite frankly, from their backgrounds, quite different, and how they perceive officialdom, which is what we are, is completely different. I recall one elderly lady, very elderly lady, I represented, and we went to tribunal because it was an overpayment. Someone had been informed the DWP, and the bundle came through for the tribunal. And as soon as she saw that the word informant, she just threw a wobble, absolutely didn't want to go forward. But this was a lady who lived not just through the communist era, the Nazi era. Her view of informants are completely different to real. So I think I would defer. I understand that. And some of the backgrounds of the people that I've represented, absolutely horrific. So I'll not go down there. That doesn't mean I've got a solution how we do go about it, but I don't understand why, and I'll go along.
Thank you very much for that. I've got Councillor Driver next, please, and then Councillor Paddy.
Yeah, my worry is what part we actually play in this with the people of the city. I mean, if you look at the surveys came back, one of them, we ended up when it did come from, I was just reading the replies, it's totally against what Norwich City Council are actually doing and want to work together with other organisations. Now, I just want to know is this the way forward, what we should be going through, asking more questions by ourselves? Should we be kind of joined up, approved with other councils, or are we working on our own? Because what I'm saying there, and what I'm saying with polls, totally against everything we're actually trying to put forward here at Scrutiny. But I just wondered, where did that come from? Did it come from a refugee organisation, or did it come from Norfolk County Council or South Norfolk?
I don't know if you can answer.
The list of organisations we sent the survey to was in the January committee agenda, I believe. We pulled a big list of organisations that do support refugees and asylum seekers. So it's an organisation that do undertake support work. We did put in the survey an option for people to withhold their name and details of who they work for if they wish, so that people would feel free in responding. But it is a little bit unfortunate we are in that position. I do appreciate that.
But if we had, instead of saying withdrawn, if we had new routes,
yes, but they opted to give details.
Point of view,
yeah.
What they looked at here instead of the withheld one.
Yeah.
Then that would look different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I think if we'd got a broader range of responses, that might have assisted the position overall. I think it does raise an interesting point as well. So I realise lots of debates focused on the voice of the refugee and asylum seeker, which is really important. There is that point about the voice of the professional support and the organisations and how we weave that into. That's worth considering.
Is it too many?
Sorry, too many?
Too many working on their own?
Possibly. I think it shows that maybe we need to understand that more.
Well, in many respects, that's the point made in the withheld submission, that there's too many. Clearly that person that's written in the first person doesn't have the coverage of their convictions in order to go public with that. But Councillor Paddy, you were next, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to highlight the fact that surveys aren't always the best method to engage with hard-to-reach stakeholders, and there are a whole host of approaches and methods to be able to engage with, people who struggle with engaging with researchers, etc. And I mean, for example, there's a text by Alan Bryman. He's a good social scientist. But there's examples and approaches in texts like that can guide you. So I accept that surveys are useful to baseline, but there might be other approaches that will present you with data that is useful.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Osborne and Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, I do think the business manager will have that data-led approach as well. So we can find some way of doing that. The best practice, and that's what seems to need. So I don't know how to make any sort of recommendation for that.
Yeah, there does seem to very much be largely a view in the room that better discussion and going out and finding out how people are is good, but we haven't come up with any concrete recommendations on how that can actually work for the benefit of everyone. Got Councillor Galvin, and then Councillor Huntley, and then Councillor Champion.
Can I propose then that the recommendation is to look into and indeed decide on a method of approach that is acceptable to groups that uses some of those techniques. So, when we say survey, our mind jumps to like a paper-based survey, but that's not what we mean here. We mean a way of gaining data directly from service users in our city, which enables us to scrutinise, because that's what we're doing here, the services provided and the need out there, and takes us another step forward in actually listening to people in this city, because I feel genuinely that they're not listened to at the moment because of their situation. So I think we can go take that step forward, but we obviously don't quite know what that step looks like yet, because it's not straightforward.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Huntley, Councillor Champion, and then Councillor Giles, Councillor Carley.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up a point on page 65 of the report, where a volunteer states that they've tried to contact the council, I think it's 15 times, but translation services weren't available. Could we hear a bit more about the extent of the in-kind service that we use? Would that be an unusual circumstance of somebody not having availability of translation services like that?
It's not specifically my service area, and therefore I'm not overly familiar, albeit you might point out when on the bottom of our committee reports we highlight the availability of the in-trans service, and therefore we'd be, just wait for the police car, and therefore obviously we'd contact in-tran to say we've got a committee report, someone needs it translated, can you assist, if that was the case. I think and actually interestingly, I spoke to that individual myself who relayed that actually on the phone that's what she believes is being told to people, and is her experience of calling up. So I think it could be feasible to make a recommendation to ensure that all of the customer contact team are fully aware of the details of the in-trans service and what's available.
Thank you very much. I'd certainly like to make a recommendation of that then, that the availability of this service is advertised when people contact the council.
Thank you. And that customer contact is sort of fully briefed on it.
I'm aware of it.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. So I didn't have my mic on. Who was next? Councillor Champion.
I just wanted to echo some of the points made, especially in relation to the survey and how it doesn't have to be a written. It's also Neurodiversity Awareness Week, and I think sometimes what happens is we've got a very linear way, a very clinical way of collecting data, and I think we have to be more, we have to be more adaptable with language barriers, with accessibility, with history, with all those things. And some of the points made have been all very valid. I think the point which hasn't been elaborated on was Councillor Carlo's point about the community connectors and possibly using some of the human resource that the council has to make connections with vulnerable members of the community, such as the service users we're talking about today. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Carlo is speaking a couple of people's time, so we'll pick that up then, I think, if that's okay. Councillor Giles.
Thanks. Obviously, I'm very concerned about the person who said they called the council 15 times and informed translation services weren't available, and I will bring that up and speak to my colleague, Councillor Hampton, just to that shouldn't be taking place. In terms of the community connectors, for example, in Earlham, there's been a sense about the liaison between the Earlham community connectors and North Polonia, who leads West Earlham Community Centre and other from us. So there are positive examples of that happening, again, between the Mancroft Community Connectors and agencies based in the city centre. So I think any extension of that would be I'd be supportive of the particular portfolio for that area. The point I was going to make originally was regarding the survey and perhaps whether, obviously, it's, as Leo alluded to at the start, it's an incredibly broad subject matter, and I think if we're going to, if you are going to utilise more officer resource into this, it would perhaps be useful to specify the particular issues that you're looking to address. That not makes sense because you want those to come out of the survey. The particular service areas perhaps you want to focus on, because obviously there are particular services like housing, possibly environmental health in relation to hotels. I don't know that we're specifically responsible for. And then there are other things such as education provision, health provision, which we work with partners on, but we're not directly responsible for. And I think it would be good to provide some focus to officers so they can focus in on what you choose to prioritise.
Thank you very much for those points, Councillor Giles. Councillor Carlo.
Thank you very much. It's just on the survey, I just wondered how much quantitative data is available at present, which could maybe pull together before going down the quantitative data collection route. And then secondly, just on a separate point, what stands out really is language, and that seems to be a pivot around which everything works really. If you can't speak English, then you can't really engage with anything at this basic level. And there is an issue about lack of language classes in Norwich. Someone from a friend from Ukraine didn't speak a word of English when she came here, and she started a real struggle to get her English up to speed, because actually she's a trained doctor, but she can't honestly get a job until she's got a very good grasp of English. And so she's had to sort of piece together over the past year a programme for herself. It's not very easy to find English language classes, so she can go to a 2 or 3 hour English language class a week, but she needs really to be doing something every day to get her spoken English up to speed. So I don't know if there's anything we can do as at all as a council, but certainly looking at provision in the city would be helpful, and also making further suggestions on how the gaps can be plugged, because I think that English language provision is covered by a different number of bodies, and including voluntary bodies. It would be helpful to list them, but to make really concerted efforts to help people learn the language.
Okay, thank you very much for that point. I don't know if there's anything we can do particularly on language.
And I'll perhaps get back to Councillor Carlo's first point as well. In terms of the quantitative data, it depends, because there are various bodies that hold different information, but it might depend on where you direct it. As Councillor Giles was suggesting, for example, if you wanted to explore more about the hotels specifically, then the County Council will have some information, as will the Home Office and Serco, who are their contractors, about who is in the hotels, the numbers, obviously not personal data, but numbers aged under 16, those types of things. If you wanted to know about how many people are accessing English as a second language, it'd be people like City College that would hold their information, as various other providers. So some of the data depends on where you want to go. In terms of English language courses, there is some support we do provide. I understand, talking to particularly those who support people as they may be moved from refugee status into settled status. But it's a partnership approach, as Councillor Giles was saying. We are ultimately not the responsible body, but there are some things we can do and are doing to assist with that. but it's an interesting area to explore as to whether there is overall enough amongst partners.
Thank you very much for that. I've got Councillor Osborne, Councillor Fulton McAllister, and then Councillor Carlo, and then Councillor Thomas. Not Councillor Carlo, Councillor Galvin, then Councillor Thomas. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, just picking up on Adam's point, if we were to be looking at the research, it's really helpful to know what we want to use that research for as the starting point. This is a general point, it's relevant to this as well, but it's related to Charles' point about the community connection as well. That's essentially, if we're going to be using research, we need to know what it's going to be used for before designing surveys, etc.
Seems reasonable. Thank you for that point. Councillor Fulton McAllister, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to address my comment, stroke question to Councillor Giles, who I hope can comment on this a little bit more. Obviously, the West Elm Community Centre is in my ward, and there's a lot of dog whistle politics going on locally about that, in terms of people talking about how it's not used for the community, etc. And I think those are things which need challenging. It would be really good to see if we could use the community connectors to work with the local schools. Often the way you do get through to changing parents' views is through the local schools, so that would be my recommendation. And I don't know if there would be either capacity within the team to do that, or whether there would be change in political will to ensure that happens. But I think the Community Connectors team at the moment seems to be not necessarily managed in the most strategic way. It could be redirected in a little bit better way for actually building these bridges amongst communities where it's needed. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Councillor Giles, please, if you can.
Thanks, Matthew. Well, I mean, firstly, on a political level, the language that the current government are using to stigmatise ethnic minorities, asylum seekers, refugees, for the faults of their broader policies, socioeconomic policies, is taken from a playbook as old as time. So, on a more specific point, yes, I'm happy to discuss with the communities team and yourselves as ward councillors about how that can be implemented or put into practice on a practical level in that community, in terms of addressing the specific concerns that people may have or may believe or may have been led to believe that the West Elm Community Centre isn't available for community hire. There is a service level agreement in the lease which means that those community groups who had bookings with the West Elm Community Association prior to its dissolution are entitled to continue with those bookings. And indeed, the service level agreements that connects that the premises must be available for broad community hire, and Norfolk Colonia are very good at ensuring that does indeed take place. And so I'd just like to rebut any mistaken beliefs related to that.
Just for absolute clarity, I'm aware of that. I'm not trying to further those beliefs. I was trying to highlight they are mistakenly held, and that's where we need to invest the resources of the community connectors, in my view.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Galvin.
Thank you. Yeah, community centres come up in the list of recommendations that came from the group. So there's a kind of a set of very specific things that came up from talking to the service users so far at the meetings that I've circulated. And I wondered if I can propose that those, I haven't got time probably to go through them all here, but if they went to officers, as I said, and officers kind of came back and said what could be done, what was within scope for all of those, and then we'd be able to give that answer to the people that came, to some of the groups, and we'd also be able to perhaps take some on. Some are very specific, some there might be short, medium and long-term actions that could be undertaken. Just where we've taken the time to ask people what they think and what would be good, and there are some really good things in here, and some of them might involve bringing people in city or to do work experience and things like that, to different language, things that are offered. So I won't go in here, but we have circulated them, and it might be good if that could just, a next stage of that would be to come into officers and then have an update on what can be done from those. And the other thing is that the really big thing they did raise was that they need, ideally, it's great that they're based at the Feed, which is an amazing city council sort of assisted and led service at that cafe a few days a week, but Zainab really do need somewhere to be situated, and if we could perhaps look at whether there's any space in City Hall or any other council properties, that would be really helpful to them, to give them some kind of an answer on that.
Thank you, Councillor Garvin. I think the point you make about the notes that you'd circulated, actually, it's very clear that this isn't an issue which we deal with in a scrutiny committee meeting and then we sort of forget about it. It's something, it can impact and has the positive, that has the potential to impact hugely positively on people's lives, and it's something that without binding my successor as chair, but it was something I would like to see coming back so that the council can develop its position. I think Leah mentioned about the possibility of using some of the sort of pre-election time to work on that. So if that works from your point of view, to see which of those things can be worked in, and then maybe it comes back to a scrutiny committee early in the next civic year.
I think it also worth mentioning, and perhaps some reassurance might be, because of particular concerns about some of the points being raised about the condition in asylum hotels and some of the food offerings, that has already been directly raised with Serco, who have provided reassurances around taking action. I think we're particularly mindful Ramadan was approaching, and there were some particular issues raised about food provision during Ramadan, so that has been specifically been picked up. I think it was suggested earlier by Councillor Galvin about looking into and deciding an approach to get more insight from service users. Now that potentially could, I'm just trying to weave things together, that could be in engagement with organisations that support service users or provide the service to get that. And part of that conversation could be whether the community connectors can support that process. So I think that point about how we use the community connectors and how we get that feedback can potentially be linked together quite neatly.
Thank you. I'll bring in Councillor Thomas, please.
Returning to the survey, I can't think of a solution. It seems almost intractable, but it's about engaging and supporting asylum seekers and refugees. And I recall a period when I had several clients from South Africa, and they were very reluctant to fill in the blocks form, which I saw as a virtue. So, there are services in service provision is addressing the whole community. But they were quite adamant, and obviously from their perspective, where they come from, I understand that. And just from left field, really, I applied for a job once, many years ago, in Northern Ireland. There was a legal obligation to fill in you're either a member of the Catholic community or the Protestant community. I was neither. I thought I was definitely in with the chits. I didn't get a job anyway. But it was a legal requirement. So the perspective from someone from Northern Ireland, I think the only English person would be to really interview. But their perspective, from a Northern Ireland perspective, radically different. I mean, we've got to step outside our own sort of comfort zone. But people need that engagement. As an individual, we are the face of the council. It's us as individuals, I think, that we need to be getting close to people who need that help and support. It is almost intractable, because we need the data. We see it as a solution. That's how we plan ahead. But people coming here see the world completely different. Sorry, that's just the problem's a huge one.
Yeah, it certainly is. Thank you for that. Any other councillors have anything to say at this stage? Councillor
Are
Paddy.
we eager to move on to the next item? but I just wanted to say that I think generally there isn't one solution to this. It's an ongoing iterative, and we will all learn and develop and be able to support asylum seekers, refugees, the most vulnerable in our society by having this ongoing discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I suppose from the point of view of wrapping up this item, I guess I'm trying to work out whether we've got some specific recommendations that were captured. But I think that because it's been a very good conversation, I guess you've been capturing some of the sort of the broad thrust of what members want to come back at a further meeting.
And if it helps, I've tried to capture them. Lucy might correct me a couple of times, and I might have summarised a few bits, but I could run through. As I mentioned just now, looking into and deciding an approach to get more insight from service users in relation to refugee and asylum seeker services, ensuring the availability of Intran is promoted and the customer contact team fully briefed on Intran. Reviewing what quantitative data might be available in relation to refugee and asylum seeker access to services. I haven't put down anything specific in relation to English language class and support, but that might be an area of focus the Scrutiny Committee wants to look at. I've captured that, and apologies to Councillor Giles, but I've captured that you'll talk to the communities team about how to encourage effective integration and correct misunderstanding and perhaps mislearned beliefs, particularly in West Earlham. Officers to review the recommendations and thoughts from the Zainab Cafe session and initial responses to these, and whether and how to find accommodation for the Zainab Cafe moving forward.
Okay, is everyone happy with that? Oops, I didn't have the mic on again. Everyone happy with that? Thank you very much for noting those down, and thank you to members for the discussion there. Councillor Giles.
Have Zainab Cafe actually asked for alternative premises?
Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, it's premises, they don't have premises at the moment. So the Zainab project is a project, cafe is something they run in the cafe. Yeah. So they're happy with the cafe, I think, but they need premises as an organised. So there's kind of two elements there. Yeah. So it's not that they want to move, but they need something. But we can talk to them a bit more about what they need. They have very specific.
Thank you for that. Anything else? Councillor Stutley.
Just in response to that, it would be useful for us as members and probably officers as well to know precisely what kind of requirements there are for those premises, so we seek an alternative.
Can we leave that with Leah to sort of find the appropriate person to liaise with them to find out what they need?
Yeah, we obviously have a property team that I can raise this point with, that sometimes even if they don't know if we've got a solution, might be able to highlight other solutions that might be available.
Great, thank you. Right, well, thank you very much for all the work on this really important topic, and I think it will be one that we absolutely should keep picking up as we go forward and help help really improve the outcomes for those people. So thank you for that. So we now move on to item 7, I think it is, which is recommendations on the green financing item, which came to the meeting on the 19th of January 2023. I'll go straight in and call in Councillor Scrutiny, who has some recommendations that can be a starter for 10, I think. So, thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, well, I mean, we had a good meeting on this, and we learned quite a lot from the presentation that we were given, and I think most of that is in the pack. And it was broadly set up into 5 different areas, which are local climate bonds, green mortgage campaign, integrated retrofit finance, green rental agreements, and property-linked finance. So I'd like to make a basis of a recommendation for each of these. The local climate bonds, I wish we had somebody with us to give us a little bit more information about this, because I took from that presentation that it may be quite small in terms of the scope for this sitting. And we heard that one of my concerns was that because interest rates are quite low and no longer competitive, and we heard that investors in the market are likely to put more weight on benefits than return, which was reassuring, but clearly demonstrates that the scope is quite narrow. So what I wanted to recommend was that to be broadly supportive, but to have a look for more investigation into the detail of how Norwich City Council can deliver these investments, and to include in that work some projections for the rates, the data, the take-up, and comparisons with WRB rates, but also just basically how much it is likely to be raised from this type of investment for a city of this size, and of course how that will be used, and the cost to bring that in.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Galvin, who indicated first, and then Councillor Osborne.
It's really handy to have the idea set up like that. In the community municipal investment bonds or local climate bonds, we had a very sort of clear briefing from them, but I know that the Chief Executive has had discussions with the Green Finance Institute separately, as well as a meeting with them about that too. So I'd kind of like to find out what happened from that discussion, and whether there are any more to put forward. The case studies showed quite clearly that they've been very successful, and they are looking, they go right through to the mid of last year, but I think there have been several more since then that have been successful. They have a very high success rate. And what came through really clearly for me from that presentation was that we can't hope to address the amount of need in terms of finance for retrofitting without blended finance models. We will never pay for what's needed as local government. It's just not possible. There's a huge need. So what's really critical is to start to pilot blended finance models. And these pilots exist. West Berkshire, Warrington, Islington, Camden, Cotswold, Telford and Wrekin, they're not all huge councils. They're councils like us, some of them and more, have done this successfully. Raised, around £1 million often, sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more. There are projects that we could take forward. For instance, we could have a straightforward project to look at community centres, to raise funds around retrofitting all of those for ourselves. So I think there are potential projects there that will be fairly straightforward. And what they said to us at Scrutiny is they're very, very happy to work with us to do that. So we've got the Green Finance Institute, it's their bread and butter. They came, they gave us a very good presentation, they want to do it. We've got the political will here. It's not going to use this money, it's a step in the toe in the water. And what they also said, it's very important to pilot this, and they see this as a stage where you can start small. Doing one doesn't mean so you don't have to start with a great big project. To start with one toe in the water of blended finance, it's a way forward. I think we're at the stage where we can commit to doing it rather than looking into it more at this stage. I'd hope that could be our recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
On the community kind of ones.
I'll bring in Councillor Osborne, then Councillor Stutley.
Thanks. Yeah. I'll speak about climate bonds and I'll come back to the others if that's right. Because it seems relevant here.
Yeah, I think if we do, if I can get, in effect, Councillor Stutley to, because he's got his list, to sort of lead on each one, and then we'll have a discussion about each of those as we make our way through. So.
Councillor Kendrick and Councillor Stutley will recall that we spoke about this in 2020, and since then, the sort of conversations I've had with officers about whether this is possible, or whether it's workable and desirable, is that absolutely workable and desirable and feasible. What would make it desirable is having a project that we can invest that capital funding in, and that's been the barrier so far. One of the barriers is finding a project that we've invested in. So yes, in your recommendation, see actually looking at where we can invest that project, and there have been motions in the past that sort of hinted towards that to the council. So in 2019, I think there was one. So there should be some sort of existing work that we can build on as a council. Just in terms of Councillor Stutley's point about the specificities of it and some more details. On average, CMIBs or green bonds, whatever you call them, save up 0.5% after fees, like the PWLB certainty rate. Then if you factor in the donations that lots of investors provide, lots of people sort of donate benefits back into the scheme, it goes up to about 0.4% of savings. So on average, there is a saving versus the PWLB alongside all the social benefits that you get from it. So, and I've got more details here, but I sent them already sent to you as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Stutley. I suppose in effect, you've got your recommendation on the table, and it's whether any of these suggestions can be tweaked into it.
Well, I guess it's kind of developing a little bit, because I quite like the idea of having a targeted approach, so that we can identify a target for a scheme with a view to reaching that target, and then you go straight to delivery, and then something can happen relatively quickly. Community centres is not a bad idea. It depends where the greatest need is and where we can have a quick win in terms of the cost of the retrofit programme compared to the benefit that provides at the time. So maybe the recommendation should be to identify that with a view to proceeding to a scheme, subject, of course, to the officers not creating barriers in terms of the cost that it would rise to implementation. And I think I certainly accept that people that will invest in these kinds of bonds do so with a view to making a difference rather than having a return for themselves. So I think so. I guess in terms of the wording of the recommendation, it would be seek to outline a specific project.
Councillor Huntley.
I'm just looking back on my...
sorry, we've got too many mics on.
Thank you. I'm just looking back on my notes from the January meeting. I think this is a good idea. What was suggested there was the council picking something already earmarked, swapping out from PWLB funding, so something that's perhaps already in the capital plan. We could look at sort of picking up as a way forward with this.
Councillor Osborne.
I think, yeah, possibly. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be that, because a lot of those capital programmes are already going to be funded through PWLB or savings funding, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, yeah, I think we can look at that.
Thank you. Are people happy with the revised wording that Councillor Stutley produced for first one? Yeah, great, thank you. I think we've got a recommendation there.
Okay, thank you. The next one on my list is the Green Mortgage Campaign, and I understood that to be largely a sort of a promotional approach from the council rather than actually being a mortgage provider, although of course that isn't impossible, and I think that is pointed out we did used to do that. But in terms of a recommendation, it was going to be to seek further information, analysis of the green mortgage market, the providers, and further suggestions about how Norwich City can be a part of it in terms of promotion or further.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, again, happy to really support that. I think that there are examples of councils working with other third sector organisations, community mutual banks and community land trusts, for example, on how to offer those kind of remortgages or 0% interest lending. I think some of Bournemouth is doing something like that on quite short term loans, but ideally longer term loans. There's a project in the southwest somewhere where they're doing that as well, setting up a sort of regional, essentially a regional mutual bank. So I think I don't know what the delivery mechanism of that in Norwich would be, but I think it's worth exploring.
I wonder with some of those things whether they sound like they work better at scale with larger authorities. I don't know how much we are potentially an island in a sea of others who don't necessarily want to go down that route. But doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it. But I just want the sort of practicalities of it. I'll bring Councillor Scrutiny then Councillor Osborne back in.
So can I suggest therefore adding in seeking opportunities to work with partner providers.
As you looked my way, that definitely makes me a little bit more comfortable, because I think it's when you start talking down the road of mortgages, investment banks, councils doing that thing, they're sometimes very, very well intentioned, but they come with an incredible level of risk that sometimes partner organisations can be better at managing on a portfolio basis.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Osborne and Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out working with other councils in Norfolk on it. There is some in the Norfolk Climate Change Partnership, which is all the councils, environmental officers have now, so to make retrofitting one of their priorities. Finally, and this could, I think, this could be a sort of Norfolk-wide retrofitting study on what can be done to retrofit Norfolk Council, where the skills that come from, and where the funding is going to come from. So I think it is worth exploring working with other councils.
Perhaps we can deal with that just in the partners.
Partners and authorities.
Yeah. Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, so there's I can't remember their name, but they're called Lendology, and they're a community interest company in the southwest, and they're very interested in working. They actively want to break out of the southwest and work across. And they're a social enterprise lender, so they actually lend for retrofit, and they work very extensively with a whole set of councils in the southwest. So I recommend that. I'm just saying here so that I don't forget again their name, but obviously there are probably others that could be done, but Lendology is an organisation that made it their business to lend to homeowners to do retrofit and to work with councils to do that. And they'd be very happy to come and talk to us. So it might be a recommendation to just explore that again.
I mean, it's interesting actually, an organisation that works in the southwest, which in many respects has similar rural challenges that are in Norfolk. If you're thinking of looking beyond the city and going into the wider Norfolk, they may well have some experience of working in the more challenging rural areas. So,
they do. You can see their websites. I'll circulate them.
Thank you. I had Councillor Driver.
Yeah, this all sounds quite good to me, but do we know about this person, what security they got behind them? I mean, this sounds very like this bank that's in America this week with all those new start-up companies, and there's always other start-up companies, and then suddenly the company bowed down. I mean, are these companies really up to go bigger and support it? And and who they got behind them. If you know what I mean. They all sound great to me, but sort of just bang on payroll loans to new startup companies in silence, which is what we don't talk about.
Councillor Osborne, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know about green mortgages, but on the property finance we'll come back to later on. The idea is that the loans will be underwritten by the UK Investment Bank or Infrastructure Bank. So there would be loans that are underwritten by central government, also body. I think there are obviously stories of banks collapsing, but there needs all the recommendations from the Climate Change Committee, from the Bank of England, etc., are that there needs to be more financing mechanisms in terms of injection of finance into the retrofit market. So we need that, and obviously there's going to be some risks involved, but it's a case of assessing those risks and including any finance project.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, just to reassure you on that particular organisation, they're regulated by the FCA like any other major UK financial institution. They manage 10 million on behalf of local councils. But I'm not carrying a brief for them. I'm just saying we should do due diligence on any company we worked with. I'm sure we would do that. I wanted to say that they exist.
Yeah.
So they got £10 million, and how much do you need in Norwich?
For what?
Does that affect all loans?
Depends on what standard you've got to do it.
Well,
Probably about 5 billion.
5 billion.
If you want to do it properly.
And we're after a company who's got 10 million.
Yeah, if you want to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I just want to know where we get the 5 billion from.
Our offices.
Our officers.
Yeah. I mean, we are. I was reading an article yesterday about some of the challenges of doing this, particularly where a large chunk of the UK's housing stock is terraces, and some of the real sort of concerns with how you make that work. But anyway, we can't fix this today, but maybe we can get some recommendations that will give a starting point to going down that route. Councillor Stitley, did you have any further points you wanted to make on that one?
No, not on green mortgage campaign.
I think we're happy with the wording on that now. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So the next one on my list was integrated retrofit finance, which I understand is finance from partners to homeowners for work on their own properties, which personally I'd like to support. I think there are many people in Norwich that would like to take advantage of that if it's available, especially if it's cheap enough as a source of borrowing. So my recommendation would be to obtain stats about take-up rates from Manchester with a view to putting in or promoting a scheme and partnering in a similar way. I'd like to know how projects are delivered and the lending criteria for residents.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Osborne, then Councillor Driver, and Councillor Fulton McAllister, Councillor Huntley.
Yes, again, score for that. It's important here to be looking at what this is doing, is looking at beyond government grants or just coming back to that point about the cost of total retrofits is this big pot of money that is people's savings and potential borrowing, and we can mobilise that so that we can make benefits to the economy, locally, create jobs here, as well as decarbonising housing and reducing fuel poverty. So there's lots of benefits there. I think it needs to be done at a strategic level as well, and I would suggest that we look at why we fit sort of the Greater Norwich area, if we can work with other local authorities or other partners, partly because it works better when there's a larger pool of housing to do it with, because it's more attractive for investors. Not saying we can't do it in Norwich City Council boundaries, which certainly as a wider pool, but wider pool, and also a lot of the jobs are sort of overlapping, so they're getting like equal to 10 guys going to follow them away from Norwich City Council boundaries.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Driver, you're next, please.
Yeah, also good to be again, all this kind of stuff. But don't Norwich City Council do it already? Don't we already give tenants or, you know, the houses what rented, you already give them or lend them money to get up to standard to bring them back into use and stuff? Don't we already do that? Paul, could you do this?
Well, obviously, Councillor, sorry, Chair, good answer. Obviously, Councillor Harris would probably be better placed to answer that question. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure.
Because I've got a place like that here in Mill where houses where you've got all time, the city council actually lend their money to do that house up, and then they rent it back to the council, so the council tenants go into that house to use it until they pay back their money. You know what I mean?
I believe you are correct in having such.
So I just wondered how many of them we should do, and this is the kind of thing you're actually talking about, Jamie, but we're actually doing it through the Norwich Council.
But presumably, the current schemes relate to properties that are being in the private rental market, but there's a whole bunch of homeowners, owner occupiers who are in a position as well that we need to scale up to support.
Yeah, and the idea is not that we lend the money; it's that other partners lend the money. It's blended finance essentially.
I've got Councillor Fulton McAllister next.
Thanks, Chair. So I unfortunately think that I missed that meeting. However, there is a very large focus on essentially homeowners and private finance, whereas actually for people who most need retrofitting in their homes are renters, either council renters, housing association renters, or private sector renters. They're people who aren't.
Agreement was in there.
Pardon?
Agreement was in there.
Okay. But one of the things that I did want to ask is that we have a additional recommendation which actually focuses on the need for additional government financing to ensure that councils, housing associations and private landlords can increase their stock. We remove any cap from private landlords. I think the government is moving the cap from 2,000 to 10,000. Actually, if you're going to do external wall insulation, you're looking at 15,000. And a lot of the housing stock in the private sector, to get it up to scratch, you're still needing to spend the 15,000 level, which isn't going to happen. So I do think we need an additional recommendation which focuses specifically on those people who are renting, ensuring private landlords use their own capital to do this. And if they end up selling up, then those houses will be bought by people who actually need homes, and they'll benefit through the other recommendations that were being put forward. Sorry, I just had a bit of a concern while this discussion was happening, and there was probably a more appropriate time to raise that.
Yeah, thank you. Did you want to come in on this particular point, Councillor Stevie, and then I'll continue through my list of others.
Just to thank Councillor Fulton McAllister for his intervention. You've slightly jumped the gun because we'll be talking about that area shortly, and that'd be a good opportunity to reiterate that point. Okay,
thank you. And in which case, I have Councillor Huntley next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add an addition to what Councillor Scrutiny had recommended around tenant stats around take-up. In the January briefing, we were told that there was forthcoming data around the additional benefits, so it would be quite useful to see if that's available.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Galvin, please.
Thank you. Just a quick point on Jamie's point about working wider than Norwich to address this big challenge. The Greater Norwich Growth Board, we've got a long history of working with, and they obviously work strongly across their infrastructure development, etc., just to check, you know, and they're taking jobs, homes and prosperity for other people. It'd be just good to make sure that we pick up the possibility of working with them and things like this. It's very often used as a vehicle for other huge building projects that are multi-million pound projects. So this is kind of, we already have the vehicle there, GMGB, to do this. So could we explore putting it on their agenda? Yeah, and we have a leader on that board, and they handle vast amounts of money for infrastructure projects.
Does that dovetail into this recommendation, do you think, or are you looking to do that separately?
Oh, I don't know. Well, take your advice really and what members think, but I'd like to see it pointed to in there. I think it's a good point that we need to gear it. We can't do it alone as a council necessarily, although we have to take some steps. But we need to leverage our influence on things like the GMGB to help change the direction and bring them around. So yeah, I would like to see that particularly pointed out, whether it's a sub-recommendation in that recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, I'll bring in Councillor Champion, then Osborne, and I'll come back to Councillor Stewart. See where we're at with the other suggestions.
So I've recently applied for the to get funding via the council, via E.ON, via whichever company they've worked with, to have my own house retrofitted because I'm a homeowner, but also on a low income, which seems like an oxymoron, but I think in the current financial climate, actually, you've got a lot of people who are going to fall into that category. Just for the record, it was an abysmal communication process. In fact, I've very rarely had communication with organisations which was that bad. So we're putting 3.4 million through, from the government to invest in that. And I only knew about that because of a organisation called Warm Homes Norwich. And it wasn't via the council, as a councillor, which surprised me. And I felt there was like a information void, which I think is something which, the communication, like we're talking about all the funding and where to get all this and that and the other, and I appreciate that I'm a, interloper in your committee, but it was just something which struck me that I don't think people necessarily appreciate the value of retrofitting and where they can get funding, and there is funding available, and are we communicating that? And the council hasn't reached, they've had to extend that project until September because they didn't get enough people applying, although there's people who are applicable. And so, we've got a project right now which hasn't reached its target in the time that was allocated to it because it wasn't communicated well enough. And so, with all the goodwill in the world and all the best projects and getting finance, unless you're communicating these things effectively, it's not going to be delivered. And I just felt it's anecdotal, that's my personal lived experience, I just felt it was worth contributing.
Yeah. Thanks very much for adding that to our thought process today. It's very, very useful. Councillor Osborne.
I may be jumping in a bit here, but I believe that there's a proposal to get a communications, or sort of engagement within the environmental strategy team working on that kind of thing. So I think what Councillor Champion's point there sort of highlights the capacity issue within local authorities generally on delivering retrofitting. So I just passed a budget vote, so hope that in future budget and looking at the delivery for not just the these projects, but also social housing decarbonisation fund programs and plans to and etc. Then we make sure that there's enough capacity within the council to get that funding out, because it's also a big thing, sending it back into the city. So I wonder if there's something, a recommendation is there as well on ensuring that there's capacity to deliver that funding.
We never get anything in.
Sorry?
We won't get it.
What do you mean?
We will try and employ more staff to,
Yes, sir.
I don't know, yes. Yeah, let's employ 10,000 more staff, that would be great, we get anything done.
I think I'm talking about like 2 or 3 people.
That's just the idea you want, but I've got ideas as well, I can do it without doing everything. I mean, it's not going to do it.
I can just get things back on track. But, Councillor Stuteley, did you want, based on what you've heard, obviously you pitched the initial recommendations, any of that you can sort of incorporate in, do you think?
Well, I think we can add, we can append a couple of extra recommendations, can't we? Because this committee can always recommend additional stuff for purposes of delivering our work. So let's do that. But also, there's one or two others that I might like to attend. I think Councillor Champion made a good point about delivery and the fact that we do need to have keep a closer eye on it. The council is rather good at applying for and working with partners and getting funding for things, and we have to make sure that the take-up is sufficient to deliver it. If there's a 3.4 million pot of money, that's applied for the same thing. It hasn't come to fruition for slightly different reasons, but I can see the point that you're making. So it's something that we need to keep an eye on, and a recommendation we can add to this is to ensure that we have the staffing to look at delivery across all the recommendations that we're putting forward. I think Councillor Osborne is right. There is going to be additional resources in that department, so hopefully that can increase.
Thank you. And Councillor Galvin's point on the Greater Norwich Growth Board?
I don't see why we shouldn't certainly investigate working with partners and expanding beyond the boundaries for the good reasons made. Whether Councillor Kendrick has a view on that.
No, it seems reasonable suggestion.
Yeah, and it would be especially beneficial if there are companies within the city boundary that are delivering the projects for us.
Yeah, great, thank you for that. I think we've incorporated everything in that. Councillor Huntley.
And also, as I suggested, if we're looking at the stats to see if the additional benefits data, which we were told would be forthcoming, is something that we could draw on as well.
Yeah, additional benefits data. Okay, yeah, thank you for that. We now on to the next one, climate bonds. Is that right?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I agree, rental agreements was next
on.
Oh,
sorry, yeah.
Yes, so this is, as I understood it, an opportunity for landlords to charge a single rent to include energy and therefore incentivise them to improve their the energy efficiency of their homes in order to get a further kickback from their rents. There are some concerns with this from myself and other members, I think, about the potential for abuse, so I'd like to hear what other members say about that. And a specific concern also about the implications for tenants, especially those on benefits. So my recommendation was to, with those caveats included, to investigate and introducing, promoting green rental agreements for private landlords in the city. I think it will have a particular incentive for HMO licence holders. We could perhaps incentivise it within that group of landlords. There's a licensing implication, and it would enable us to keep a firm control over it. So I wonder if members can address the points that I was concerned about.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll bring in Councillor Osborne, then Councillor Fulton McAllister, then Councillor Galvin.
Yes, in a way, this is something the council has already done. So, for example, on some of the district heating systems, the council properties, it's a one rate, rent, and ironically, the heat pump in Farmer's Yard is the way the government grant construction they have to build the individual heat pump, which council not happy about actually. So I think there's some precedent in actually preferring that kind of. When I lived in Brussels, I have a little flat like that. It's just so much easier to pay one rent as well. I do like to go back to the GFI and find out more about the sort of protections for renters as well on that. There is also other options for green rental, sort of decarbonizing private rental sector. One of which is looking at insurance products. I don't know whether any of these actually exist yet, but I think some of them are being piloted. The idea is, I can't explain it exactly, but it's complicated, but the idea is that there's specific insurance products that incentivize landlords to insulate and improve energy efficiency of their houses. So I wonder if we can incorporate that into the recommendation well, or whether that's not, especially in the city.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll bring in Councillor Fulton McAllister now, please.
Thanks, Chair. So I have huge concerns about essentially incentivising landlords to make more profit. I cannot sign up to that morally. I think it's reprehensible. I also have grave concerns about the fact that if energy is included in rent, then people are not in any way, regardless of financial situation, going to be disincentivised to wasting energy. And while I think there are some social arguments as to why we should do it in council housing, because we are dealing with the poorest in society, I think that it's quite a mixed bag in that respect, because it could help people with their bills, but I think we need to look at what the motivation for these suggestions and recommendations is. And the recommendation is not so much based on income inequality, but more based upon wanting to tackle climate change. It's a terrible idea. I think it's got some merits for income inequality reasons, however. But for this reason, I would instead like to be suggesting that we ask our cabinet to write to national leaders of all political parties to lift the cap and require that landlords actually insulate their houses to grade C minimum with no cap. I don't think that would be problematic. If landlords sell up, then house prices plummet, and that's a good thing, frankly. And I say that as a homeowner who's benefited from increased, well, I say benefited. I've experienced increased housing prices. My house is still worth one house. It's not worth any more or less in theory. I do think that we should be looking at having that national approach, because by doing these things locally, we could actually make the environmental footprint much worse. And if we're having landlords preening more profits off of poorer tenants, then actually we're not even helping on that financial inclusion perspective. So I've got grave concerns with the wording I've seen and what I've heard discussed on green rental agreements. I don't think it's practical or thought through, but I do think there's stuff we can do for private sector renters and for social renters.
Thank you, Councillor Fulton McAllister. There's an interesting point about your house being worth one house. I bought mine a quarter of a century ago, and the value that it's appreciated in that time, where I've done nothing, is entirely academic, because it's a house. Anyway, there we go. I've got a number of people who have indicated. I've got councillors Galvin, Kendrick and Osborne and Champion.
So Nelson Ward that I represent has got the worst fuel poverty in the city, largely due to lots of Victorian terraced houses. Although those houses are perversely worth quite a lot of money, they're actually very cold and very expensive to retrofit. And a lot of them are owned by landlords. So, and people are living in cold, unpleasant tenancies. And there likely will be a legal requirement on landlords coming forward. That is coming forward. So there likely will be a requirement to insulate homes, and landlords are aware of that, which may well precipitate a crisis.
About 10 grand.
Yeah, there likely will be a crisis in rental stock when people aren't able to rent out anymore. I think some of the points you raised, it's obviously very valid, and no one wants to do anything to put rents up unfairly. I don't think this is about getting more profit for landlords. It's perhaps enabling them to achieve compliance, and it's sort of aimed quite firmly at institutional landlords as well, so people with more properties. So I'd sort of recommend that we explore it a bit more, because there are so many tenants that need it, that need their properties to be better insulated. So I think I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one for those reasons. I think it needs exploring, because we have a duty of care to the many people that rent to make sure their homes, that there are methods for them to be adequately insulated and heated. And it's certainly not about increasing rents, it's about making homes warmer.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Kendrick next.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think one of the problems is just the fluidity of energy prices. And of course, when landlords take that into account, they are likely to be, well, risk, there's always a cost with risk. I mean, the gas price has increased fourfold after the Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And now they're now actually falling, because at the end of the day, Western sanctions have not been that particularly effective. And now the Russians are simply selling their liquefied natural gas to China and India. And so the prices are beginning to fall. But inevitably, who knows what's going to happen in the years to come? I think if one is a landlord, one will quite understandably, so we say, look towards a kind of pessimistic version of the future. Because at the end of the day, if it is pessimistic, and I don't know what happens if China invades Taiwan, what energy prices will be. So the danger is that it will be the tenants who actually land up paying for the risk. We don't realise that. Another point, of course, is, and yes, we do have district heating schemes in Norwich, no question about that. But there is also the counterinsensitive of that, is that why should a tenant necessarily want to say, I'm not very careful about my thermostat at home at the moment. I actually sort of set it to come on, the gas supply that is, the gas boiler to come on 1 hour before I estimate that I should be returning back home. I'm afraid to say I've got it badly wrong, because I think I thought I might be home about 7 o'clock. I think it's probably going to be more about 8 o'clock. So it'd be nice and warm anyway. And then it goes off at 11 o'clock with then it comes, and they're always safely tucked up in bed. Now, obviously, I'm that careful because I was going to pay for the gas bill. I think at the end of the day, if I thought to myself, well, it doesn't really matter, because it's going to be in the rent anyway. I think I might be a little bit tempted to turn that thermostat up from 19 degrees up to about 24 degrees, and I think I'd like to have the heating on all night, so it'd be nice and warm in the morning. So there is a counterproductive effect sometimes of these kind of schemes. So I think one has to take those two factors into account, as I say, just mentioned the counterproductive nature in terms of CO2 emissions, but also the danger of the tenants being at home to pay the risk that the landlords can understandably envisage that might happen if gas prices and electricity prices were to surge once again.
Thank you for that. Councillor Osborne, you were next, please.
Well, you're living in luxury compared to me in my terrace house. Yeah, maybe have the heating on for a couple of hours when it's cold. Yeah, I think this sort of misses the point in a way. So apologies for being blunt about that, but this is not about landlords making extra profit, as Councillor Garber said. There's going to be a legal requirement for landlords to reach EPCC, and a lot of landlords do not have the capital to do that, and they need to do that, and that will benefit tenants as well. I don't think that it's going to mean landlords profiting out of tenants. What it will be doing is improving the energy efficiency of the building, making sure that landlords will benefit from having greater value property, but they won't be benefiting from increased rents from the tenant. In terms of the risk, investing in energy efficiency buildings is a pretty risk. It's not a particularly risky thing to do, because if gas prices go up even more, then essentially what we're doing is the saving will be greater. Right? So I think it is pretty secure as an investment. I do take some issue with the idea that we should not be supporting landlords to decarbonise their housing, because, as has been highlighted, the private rental sector is the worst performing sector anywhere, by quite a long way as well. Social housing is generally actually amongst the best in terms of energy efficiency. So I think that there does need to be more investment into decarbonising the private rental sector. This is one way of doing it. The insurance mechanism that I suggested is another way. So I think there's certainly no harm in looking into it. And as I said earlier, look into the protections that there are for tenants, etc. But also, we've been sort of talking about this in the abstract. There's no, I would be surprised if anyone here is a landlord, or just they are. But it would be good to talk to some landlords as well, and representatives of landlords, and also to some extent trust the advice of the experts on this, the Green Finance Institute, who developed this model.
Thank you for that. Just so people know who I've seen, I've got Councillors Champion, Stootley, Driver, Fulton McAllister and Carlo. So Councillor Champion, please.
I suspect I've missed the memo on this. I'm just curious. So it's already illegal for landlords to have properties which are in the F and G category. Has the council, have we ascertained that there's no properties in these criteria already?
It's out of point of information now. Because I asked the council about the information, and there are 740 properties in Norwich which fall into F or G EPC bands. Basically, the landlords are not complying with. The City Council should be taking enforcement action, but haven't done so. And the City Council is saying, well, we need to get more resource into the private sector team in order to take enforcement action. But those are 740 properties where tenants are suffering very cold conditions. And so we really do need a stick and carrot approach to. Yes, carrot and stick. Take the stick to the landlords to take enforcement action, but obviously they need support to take action.
Thank you for that information there. Councillor Stootley, I think. Next, please.
Yes, thank you. So I think there's some agreement here about this being more requires further investigation. I think I probably put the seeds of doubt into some people's minds about incentivising, but what I meant with that was rather than creating extra profits, some landlords will be able to do that, was that perhaps through the HMO licensing system, and we have our own HMO licensing policy, which could bring them improved and tightened up in order to require our licensees to take up this kind of a scheme. So I'd like to propose that we investigate this and the implications for all stakeholders, with particular regard to protection for private renters. Some may well may wish to take this up. And so one of the notes I made was to ensure that tenants have a means to propose and begin the process with landlord as well if they wish to. And just if I may respond to Councillor Carlo's point about further incentivising, I think if we don't have the resources for enforcement, that's another recommendation that we can add to this, that at least we begin a process, because once people see that there's some enforcement going on, action will start to happen.
Yes.
There is enforcement.
There is an enforcement process, and it is, but obviously with a large number of properties, it's going to be a slow process with under-resourcing.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in, thank you for that. I've got
Chair, I've just got one last point, and you're going to have to come back to me, and that is on the fact that the green rental agreements, we were told, can work to property-linked finance, which will make a big difference to how people approach this, especially landlords.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I've got Councillor Driver, please, next.
Yeah, I'm in favour of Matthew across the table here. I think landlords will try to pop over this. It's just human nature. If you say to some landlord, would you like to pay me £20 a week, or would you like to give the tenants £20 a week? Ooh, I don't know which one I want to do. Well, and Carly is what they want to do. They're going to put the rent deposit up and put it in there. Osborne was saying about prices of gas at the moment are high, so the prices will actually be high. And now, after they've spent this £10,000 doing their place up and done all the rent, put all the insulation in and their apartment is nice and warm, do you think they're actually going to bring the rents down? I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, the rent will still be there and the gas will be on top. And for someone who's lived in a place like this, I mean, that's great. I mean, you can go on holiday 2 weeks, leave your gas, electricity on all day. What? And come back in 2 weeks' time. It's lovely when you come home. I mean, your place is nice and warm, you've hopefully got a whole living off of that. That's fantastic. I mean, you can go away with anything. You go out at night time, at least you can come home and find out where to put the key in the door, because you can see it, there's a light on. So people will waste electricity, they will waste gas. And I think this is a bad way to go. And I think the only people it will benefit is like MPs who are the biggest renters out there all over the places and make another fortune out of us because they're not looking after their tenants again. And they've already done that on the water.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I mean, I'm pretty sure the recommendation is around sort of investigating and looking at the feasibility rather than necessarily going. But no, it's a valid point. I'm just going to bring in Councillor Fulton McAllister, who was next, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to suggest that we slightly amend the recommendation as is to specifically state that we would investigate the green rental agreements where they are regulated tenancies. I would not like to see green rental agreements on a short-haul tenancies. And the reason is because what Paul said, you'll end up having fluctuations in energy price, and what will then happen is they'll evict tenants with a Section 21 notice, and they'll give 30 days and they'll have a brand new tenant in place paying a much higher rate because they will not shoulder risk. If it's a regulated tenancy, then you can ensure that tenants are not evicted in those situations. The other slight amendment I'd like to suggest, and I'll leave this to Ian to word in a palatable way, but is to ensure that that the rents do not increase above market rent based on or expected market rent based on them still being green rental agreements, because again I do not think that landlords should be given carte blanche to profit along this, and if this is something endorsed by the City Council, we should only be giving our endorsement if it meets these criteria.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I've got Councillor Carlo, I've got Councillor Osborne and Councillor Galvin.
I think all my points have been made. I just want to ask Councillor Fulton McAllister, how are you actually going to improve the housing conditions of people living in the private sector, rented sector, notwithstanding.
Well, I agree with you. We should be taking more enforcement action.
Yeah.
And frankly, we should be forcing landlords to sell up. If landlords sell up, house prices go down, more people can afford their own homes rather than renting. And we should build more social housing for people who can't afford to buy. But that's a bigger picture than we can address here.
Yeah. That's certainly enforcement action is really important.
Yeah.
A number of authorities around the country are taking enforcement action now against these properties.
Yeah, we are.
No, we're not. No, right. When I asked the City Council whether they were taking enforcement action against these properties, I was first of all referred to the County Council, which was not correct. They're dealing with commercial properties. It's the City Council which is dealing with private rented residential properties, and the Council admitted they're not at the moment taking enforcement action. But Kings Lynn West Norfolk Borough Council, for example, they've got a web page for tenants to report their landlords who are not complying with energy efficiency standards.
I thought we took landlords to court benefits for our buildings.
Just
very selectively.
Very short information point, obviously. In the budget that we've just passed, there was additional funding for more enforcement action to be taken. So while it's not been as proactive as wanted, I think we are hopefully moving in that direction. But I agree we should be doing more.
I mean, there's some interesting adverts coming from the government every time I log into any form of social media at the moment, pushing the notion that if you are a tenant in and your landlord is not dealing with things, you need to be reporting them. So I wonder whether that will see an uptick in reporting to us as an appropriate body for that. Anyway, Councillor Osborne, you are next, please.
I actually get the social housing versions of those adverts, so I think there's a difference between Bank and but yeah.
Well, I live on the next road to you, so...
Probably some, I think Councillor has, I think this kind of missing the point. To answer Councillor Driver's point, these are green rental agreements, and ideally would be done at the start of a tenancy, so they're not going to be suddenly putting people's rents up with a rental agreement, that contract. I imagine that it could be written in the increments in which it can increase would be written into that, or whether it can increase in line with inflation or whatever.
We've got 10 flats in one house, how will that work? You can come in next week and your rate could be different to mine.
Sorry, Councillor Driver, can Councillor Osborne finish making his point, please? I'm conscious I'd quite like to get to the end of this particular recommendation fairly soon.
I guess what I'm saying is I would support the recommendation as it was originally written. I think you can look into it. I don't think it will penalise tenants and benefit tenants. It's not about landlords wanting to then evict their tenants, but there's actually an incentive in there for them to keep their tenants in long term, because that's how they get the money back after the capital investment.
I'm just going to bring in Councillor Galvin, and then I'll bring Councillor Stuteley in to sort of reread the revised version of the recommendation and see if we've got something that's palatable to members. Thank you.
It's a very, very quick point. Most tenancies are short hold tenancies, so I'd be really worried about saying we won't deal with them. Yeah, because you're basically not going to address most tenancies are short hold tenancies. So if you do that, you're going to basically cut out all those people in Nelson that are in freezing cold landlord houses. It's totally accept that we don't want to charter for putting up rents, but bills are going up anyway. There's no real evidence to show that people leave their heaters on if the house is better insulated. So, this isn't a reason not to take action, I think, and it is really dangerous to write them out of the story.
Thank you. Councillor Stuteley, can I ask you to read that revised version again, and we'll just see where people are at on that.
So I mean, my understanding of how this would work is that the tenancies, all the work would be done before a tenancy is signed. So there's some protection in there for tenants, because that would be agreed in advance. based on the work that's produced. And I don't know what's possible with the terraced houses in Norwich, but if you retrofit a high degree, there'll be less abuse by tenants because they'd actually have to deliberately be turning their heating up and baking themselves in order to abuse it if you've got the highest rating of property. So I think we should go back and seek clarity on how the model works in practice, with a view to protecting tenants in particular, those on short hold tenancies, how tenants can get involved with the process. And I do agree we should also seek to find out from the views of more tenants and the landlords as well, and look, basically get some more information, because I think there's implications for everybody, possible abuses, as I said right from the beginning, and probably everybody in this committee would want to protect the tenant first, but with a view to making sure their houses are warm, so we'll find a way of making it work.
Thank you very much for that
recommendation.
Yeah. Are people happy with that sort of revised version?
So
Councillor Galvin.
Is it worth mentioning that, is it called Let Norwich or
NCC.
Yeah, would that be sort of part of the model looking at that NCC as a pilot?
Yeah, Let NCC is the council's organisation that works with private landlords and rents out at affordable rent. Yes, so that might be a good starting point for working
And it
with
would
partners.
address our concerns about the tenants being ousted.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think landlords are given a 4-year assurance then, and I imagine that the individuals are given a longer assurance where possible.
Yeah, no, I'd be very happy to see reference to the NCC in there. Good, I think we have a recommendation then. Thank you. So we now move on to property-linked finance.
Yeah, so this last one isn't actually available yet in the UK as far as I know, unless there's been an update. But how it works is that the finance is provided for the retrofit updates to that properties, individuals' properties, and there's a premium paid off on that house for the rest of its existence, and that's paid by whoever lives there, whether it's a tenant or a homeowner. So that would be a small repayment over the very long term, so therefore manageable for most householders. I quite like the idea of this. I think it could really work. One thing I did bring up was the concern that homeowners might not be willing to do that because they're concerned about how that might affect property if there's a cost associated with people moving in. But we were reassured that actually it improves the status of the property, kudos of having the additional works and energy efficiency. It actually probably could have a benefit to the house prices. So those that might be concerned about that, property owners, probably okay. And I think in a number of these things in Norwich, Councillor Champion talked about this earlier, I think there are a lot of people with properties, that own properties, either because they bought them a long time ago or recently they're asset rich and cash poor, and some have retired since then and have low incomes. A number of these could be really beneficial, especially if they work together. So my recommendation for the property linked finance was to support the concept and seek to be considered for a pilot if that's available, or for early adoption.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Driver, then Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I just want to say it's not happening here, but my mum and father, when they bought their house, they didn't have no money at all, they don't want coal, they're looking at that. They borrowed £15,000 to get an extension bill. And they never ever paid that £15,000 back. All they paid was the interest every month. But when they died, they had to pay that £15,000 back. So when the house became empty, we had to sell the house. You pay back that £15,000. Is that kind of thing you're talking about? Is that similar to what you're saying?
That sounds like an interest mortgage charge.
Yeah, but I was
that,
just saying, is that something like that?
this is over a much longer
Yeah,
period.
well, that's all 40 years.
I guess before I comment on this, Lucy and I should both declare also that we work for a charity that is funding the GFI to develop the proposal for this. So not directly linked to the development of the proposal, but charity that we work with funding it, if that makes sense. The idea is that there'll be 0% interest, so essentially just be going back to you just have to pay back premium on it. It will be underwritten by the UK Investment Bank, or Infrastructure Bank, whatever it's called, UKIB. So if anyone does default on that, or if the bank valuation for some reason, we will not be impacted by that. It does work in other countries. In America, they call it PACE loans, and it seems to be working pretty well there.
So if you borrow 30,000, you pay £30,000 back, you don't pay more.
Yeah, obviously, I can't remember whether it includes inflation or not, but you're not paying additional interest on it. Essentially what it needs is a very small change in legislation at national government level. But hopefully, if that happens, then we should be more than fine with areas. Yeah.
0% mortgage.
Yeah.
Well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. All these options, quite frankly, there's 1,001 ways of skinning a cat. Apologies to any cat owners here. But I first got involved in energy efficiency 1992, it's quite a few years ago actually. We were setting up an energy village in Nottinghamshire. Very successful. I spoke to every energy supplier in the UK, all of them, and without exception. I was always put through to the marketing department. It's a telltale sign, really. But we are sat here 30 years later talking about energy efficiency and retrofitting, or we called it contract energy management back then. We've made no progress at all, have we? And I suppose I should put some balance into this discussion, really. Retrofitting is absolutely an awful idea. Energy efficiency is the worst thing you can possibly be doing if you're an energy supplier. And that, councillors, is why we're still sat here talking about energy efficiency and retrofitting. Yeah? Why else? I mean, this is not rocket science. Insulating properties isn't advanced technology, although I think there is some advanced technology in there as well. Pulling curtains across the window. And it is about economies of scale. It's about working with partners, housing associations, other local authorities, insurance companies, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. Not our money, we've got it. Our money's not there. Not on the scale, and the figures you've mentioned are astronomical. But the money is there, the methodology is there. It's about political will. We all know that. That's what we need. But you can adopt any of that. This is the methodology, whichever way you want to go. There isn't one silver bullet. I think we're all agreed where we need to be going and how we need to be getting there in one way or another. But I find this utterly frustrating. I think I'm more frustrated than Jamie, quite frankly. I think so. But it's your fault.
I mean, it's.
What were I Sorry?
You've been doing it since before I was born.
I mean, really, I'm talking about energy companies producing less energy. It's like going to a car manufacturer and saying, If you've got any good ideas about how you can produce fewer cars, don't expect me to go excited about it. It's not going to happen. These are multi-billion-pound companies with huge influence on the political setup we've got in this country. That's what we're facing. I mean, that's the reality. What we're discussing here, we're on the right track. It is possible, it is doable, and I think we will do it because we're now, there's momentum going that way. But whatever we adopt, whatever recommendations, and I recommend more, it's fine, pick a mix. Let's go and do some retrofitting, please.
I mean, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Councillor Thomas. You've only got to look at the profits from that Saudi Aramco announced this week. Was it 161 billion US? And that is the answer to the point you're making. Anyway, but we have on the table a recommendation from Councillor Stutely for this section. Are we happy with that, Councillor Stutely? Do you want to come in and say something else at this stage?
No, I think it was about it was quite simple. This one, wasn't it? Supporting the concept, asked to be considered for a UK pilot or only adoption, whichever comes first. Ultimately, because I think this is going to be the one thing that probably does really work in Norwich, especially if we can have a workable green metals agreements policy in place as well. Got some more recommendations, if I may, quickly, and that is what we talked about on earlier, and that is about increasing capacity for delivery of the green projects. So seek from Cabinet assurances that resources will be applied to both enforcement and delivery of the green initiatives. And another one I had was, with all of these, investigating how Norwich City Council as a landlord can benefit, whether it's as a landlord of 14 plus thousand properties or let NCC or with our partner organisations like the housing associations. And the final one was investigate how our limited companies, NRL, Lion Homes as they are now, or NCSL can be a part of the retrofit programme. So in other words, being a supplier to the council and private tenants, private landlords.
Sorry, Councillor Osborne, did you?
I said, as per the Green Budget Amendment of 2023.
But it makes sense.
Yeah.
In order to capitalise on opportunities.
Yeah. Can I also add to that? At the Budget Council, as a result of this discussion, actually, so part of the discussion, there was some talk of work being underway on whole house retrofit pilots. I think it would be worth Cabinet sort of providing details of what that will be. I don't know whether it might not be at a stage to provide that detail yet, but in the coming months we can see that.
Yeah, thank you. Just put that as an ask, perhaps, Councillor Stutely.
Yes, so can we make that a request for an update before to scrutiny?
Yeah.
And the funding, full funding looks like not that.
Yeah, great, thank you. Anything else? Any more for any more? No? Great, in which case, thank you very much for this evening. I thought this has been actually a really good discussion tonight. Yes, I won't be back in May in this chair, but thank you very much. Have a bigger chair, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much for